Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Wendy Wall, and I'm the president of the Vancouver Island Strata Owners Association. On behalf of VISOA, I'd like to take a moment to say how grateful we are to the Lekwungen, Malahat, Chinook, Tusok, and Wasanich peoples on whose traditional territories we live and work. This is the second webinar in our series about EV charging for strata corporations. If you haven't watched it yet, please check out the first video in this series called EV Ready Plans for Condominium Stratas. If you live in a duplex or townhouse, don't worry. We'll be holding another webinar just for you as these rebates are structured differently. We gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation. The CleanBC Go Electric Charger program is administered by BC Hydro and FortisBC. It provides rebates towards the cost of installing EV charging equipment for multi-unit residential buildings and workplaces. The information provided in today's webinar is accurate as of December 11th. When you're ready to get started, I encourage you to check the program guide for up-to-date details. Today, we'll be talking about these things: how to engage the owners in your strata, the rebates that are available for electrical infrastructure, holding your AGM, applying for pre-approval for the rebate, what's in the quote for the project, an example of a project, and submitting the final paperwork. Your EV Ready plan presents a solution and a budget to provide each residential unit in your strata with at least one EV Ready parking space. If you want to learn more about what an EV Ready plan is and the rebate that can help your strata get one, watch VISOA's video, EV Ready Plans for Condominium Stratas. And don't worry if you think that you can't do that many parking stalls. There are rebates up to $80,000, and we'll go into more detail about that later. If you just want to install EV charging equipment in a few stalls, see our upcoming webinar, EV Charging Stations, Rebates for Stratas, on January 8th. Now that your EV Ready plan is completed, it's time to share it with your owners and discuss moving forward with the plan. You might decide to have some town hall meetings, guest speakers, anything that can educate your owners and build support. Council might want to do a survey to see how much support there is for the project and how many people are planning to buy electric vehicles in the next year or two. I've even heard of some very enthusiastic EV drivers who built excitement by taking their neighbors for a drive and showing them how their vehicle works. When you're discussing EV charging with your owners, you may want to give examples of other stratas who installed charging systems. Just keep in mind that every strata is different. There are a lot of factors that make your strata unique, so the decisions that your strata makes can be quite different than another strata. So why should owners support the project? Some people might be on board because of climate change. Others might be more motivated by property values. Get to know what's important to your owners. Certainly, demand for EV charging in condo buildings is growing. More owners will be asking for it. But also be aware that in the future, stratas might be legally required to provide charging. So you can tell your owners that it's a good idea to be thinking about this now while the rebates are available. Now let's talk about the rebates. You have to have an approved EV Ready plan first. Then you can apply for pre-approval for your project. Your strata can get a rebate for up to 50% of the costs to a maximum per stall of $600, and the maximum for your strata is $80,000. Then there's a separate CleanBC program for rebates for the charging stations themselves. If you receive the electrical infrastructure rebates, then you can also apply for pre-approval for rebates for some level 2 charging stations. Rebates can cover up to 50% of the costs, up to $1,400 per station installed, and up to a maximum of $14,000 per strata corporation. Check with your municipality as well. They may have top-up programs or other rebates. To be eligible, your strata must be a multi-unit residential building such as condos, be located in BC, and must have an approved EV Ready plan. Your solution must be for a system that uses level 2 charging stations, and they must use the strata's common electricity and/or changes will have to be made to common property to implement your EV Ready plan. A strata that doesn't qualify for the EV Ready plan rebate isn't eligible for the infrastructure rebates. VISOA will be presenting another webinar about the rebates that are available for duplexes, townhouse, and bare land stratas. Now it's time to get ready for your AGM or SGM. Council should get their strata lawyer to finalize the bylaws, rules, and user fees that owners need to vote on. The lawyer can also make sure you have suitable user agreements and indemnity agreements ready. And they can write the resolutions to go in the notice package. One thing that needs to be voted on is a significant change of use. The parking space was intended for parking, no other use. So under the Strata Property Act, it takes a 3/4 vote of the owners to allow it to be used for charging. For example, the resolution might look something like this. It takes a 3/4 vote to amend bylaws or adopt new ones. Your proposed changes to existing bylaws and new ones will depend on the information in your strata plan, your existing bylaws, the type of charging system in your EV Ready plan, and of course, the wishes of your owners. Bylaws must be read as a whole. Your strata lawyer should review all of your existing bylaws, including those about parking, alterations, repair and maintenance, insurance, and more. Proposed bylaws related to EV charging could include bylaws about who pays for the charging stations, who's required to maintain them, and the safe operation of the equipment. Your lawyer can also draft bylaws or rules about billing for the operating costs. These rules are called user fees. VISOA will be doing a webinar that focuses on bylaws, rules, and user fees for EV charging. So now you have to get funding approved and you want the vote to be successful. So think carefully about the culture of your owners before writing the resolutions. Do a bit of homework. Have other projects been supported in the past? Was it hard to get the necessary votes? Do your owners prefer using funds from the CRF or special levy, or maybe a combination of both? And remember that just because the owners in another strata were okay with a special levy of $1,000 or $2,000 doesn't mean that is the best option for your owners. What seems like an affordable cost to the owners in one strata could feel like a hardship in another. Again, every strata is different. When you write the notice for your AGM or SGM, make sure the information about EV charging is easy to understand. Avoid using acronyms like EMS. It can be very confusing. It may be easier to understand if you use the full words, energy management system. Try not to make the explanations too technical. If people don't understand or are confused, they may not feel comfortable voting to approve the project. The words in the resolutions must also be clear. The permission to direct council to do the project is actually based on the wording in the resolution, not the wording of the explanations in the notice. Some owners may not have attended your town hall meetings, so some stratas find it useful to have another information meeting after the notice package has been sent to owners. There will still be questions and discussion at the AGM, so consider having guests who can answer them, such as a strata lawyer, the person who wrote your EV Ready plan, or perhaps the contractor who you're thinking of having do the project. If the resolutions don't pass the first time, don't get discouraged. The same thing happens when we try to get funding for a new roof, repair foundations, or whatever. So stay positive. Try to identify the reasons why it didn't get enough votes, and then start planning to try again at the next general meeting. Once the owners have approved the project, council can submit the application for pre-approval. When your council goes online to apply, they will select the EV Ready infrastructure rebate. To apply for the electrical infrastructure rebate, council needs the original application reference number. That's the number council received when they first applied for the EV Ready plan rebate. You'll need the strata's postal code, a copy of the EV Ready plan that's been approved, and the installation quote. In the last webinar, we went through the list of items that can be in the quote for your project. So I'll go through these quickly. It could include costs for coordination with BC Hydro or Technical Safety BC, engineering, your electrical permit, all the materials and labor, possibly a new panel or breakers. You may need a communication system, an energy management system. There might be costs for legal services. You might also have costs for signage or painting, scanning and coring of concrete walls, possibly trenching through a parking lot, and the corresponding asphalt repairs. The rebate does not cover GST, the cost of a new BC Hydro meter, ongoing operating costs, and as we've said, the charging stations themselves are under a separate rebate program. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Lee MacFarlane. Lee is a certified installer through the Electric Vehicle Installer Training Program, and with his team at Edwards Electric, Lee has been a trailblazer in the installation of electrical infrastructure and EV charging systems in BC stratas. Lee has 30 years of experience in the electrical industry and is currently managing the largest EV infrastructure retrofit project on Vancouver Island.
Thank you, Wendy. So this is an example, if we can go back to the 35 page, please. Thank you. This is an example of a particular installation that may or may not pertain to you because every strata, every building is different. So you've obtained a revised estimate according to your infrastructure needs, and that could include the lawyer, the legal cost, or that might be separate. Your council has applied to the program for pre-approval now, and your council's received email of pre-approval, steps, and deadline to complete the project. Now, it's important to note that through the CleanBC program that BC Hydro in our area administers, you have 4 months to do the program and the installation. So it's important to consult with your chosen installer, your electrician, to make sure they're capable of the timeline before you do the pre-approval. Council has signed then a contract with the installer, which may include a letter of intent on condition of this pre-approval. The approved plan in this case makes 60 residential parking spaces EV ready. And EV ready, again, means wiring to an outlet at each parking space. So think of this as just a junction box. And ready for a level 2 charging station to be connected later. The EV ready plan evaluated the electrical capacity and many other factors, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel at this point. The solution in this case is a load managed system, reduces the number of circuits needed because of this load managed system, and owners approved the funding now at their special general meeting. So when the charging stations are installed, they will share the power under this load management system. So it's a very simple system in this case, and these network stations talk to each other to facilitate this load management. The electrical permit is obtained. A new panel and hydrometer to this new EV charging system is installed. Coring is required and to get out of the electrical room into the parking areas. And in this case, we had to scan for any items in the concrete. And then from the panel that's in the electrical room, pipe work goes to each outlet, and the outlets are within 3 meters of each parking stall itself. Now these outlets can be on the back wall, they can be in front of the stall. It's important to note that it is still within 3 meters of each parking stall, but it can be different for every strata situation. And electrical wiring communication is using the same pathway so that these charging stations will be able to connect with the local network. And it's important to note that parking has to be allocated for the project crew to work and move existing vehicles into a designated area while they work in that area, so no damage is done to any of your owners in the strata. So an SGM owner's past bylaws previously that required each individual owner who wants a charging station to pay for it. So this is where we get into the other part of the EV Ready rebate program. And in this case, 10 owners placed orders with the council, and level 2 charging stations capable or compatible with the system are chosen. It's not necessary when you're doing the infrastructure to also do the MERB charger rebate, but it can help with the costs associated to it. If you have the people there, it's that might as well factor. So in this case, the council applied for this 50% rebate for 10 charging stations. This rebate program requires the pre-approval, just like the infrastructure rebate. And the maximum rebate is up to $1,400 and up to $14,000 per strata. So that is why they maximized at 10 stations.
So when your project is finished, you submit your final paperwork, and council has to submit the following information. Again, that application reference number. This time you're going to have your invoices from the project, and your contractor is going to complete the form that's supplied by FortisBC or BC Hydro. So BC Hydro or Fortis will review the documents, and if all is in order, they'll process the rebate within 90 days. So the project is done. What happens in the future? In this example, only 10 stations were installed, but the infrastructure is in place. There are another 50 parking spaces that are EV ready. Now that the strata has bylaws, they have a process to handle future requests, and the process could be different than other stratas. In this case, the owners have to pay for their charging station, and it has to be a certain make and model so that it works with the load management system. What about the operating costs? This is probably the most common question that we get at VISOA. So the strata in this case passed a bylaw so that they can charge the people using the charging stations a user fee. It's not legal for the strata to charge an owner unless they have a valid bylaw or rule creating this user fee. The permitted methods for calculating user fees are in the strata property regulation. So VISOA will be presenting another webinar just about user fees for EV charging. In this case, the user fee is calculated from a few pieces of information. First, the manager reviews the BC Hydro bill for the meter that handles all the hydro that's being used by the EV charging system, and they divide the bill equally between the number of owners that used EV chargers that month. Then some more costs are added on. There's an annual fee, in this case, of about $180 for each charging station. And there's an annual cost for the operating permit from Technical Safety BC. So in this example, $16 is added on every month. The owners have also made arrangements with their property management company to pay their user fees every month. You can learn more about electric vehicles and the CleanBC Go Electric program on their website. If you're a BC Hydro customer, look for this page on their website to apply. The CleanBC program also provides support. So your strata council can get help from an EV charging advisor by emailing them at evadvisor@pluginbc.ca. Now that you know all about EV ready plans and electrical infrastructure rebates for condos, I hope that you'll register for the next webinar in this series on January 8th. It's called EV Charging Stations Rebates for Stratas, so not just condos. This is a great webinar for any strata that wants to install about 2 to 10 networked EV charging stations. So you can go to VISOA's website and visit our page, EV Charging for Stratas, to find out more details about this webinar series And you'll also find videos and quick links to the application forms, the CleanBC program guide, rebates from municipalities, and more. Also, feel free to contact VISOA with your questions at evcharging@visoa.bc.ca. Thank you so much to Lee MacFarlane, the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation, and to all of you for joining us today.